Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Squat Cobbler. I'm Kelly at KELLYTHUL on Twitter and Instagram.
And I am Dr. Mike at Official Pagan on everything. Make sure you guys like, subscribe, comment, buy a t shirt, turn on notifications, sacrifice your firstborn. Kelly, anything else you want to add to that?
Uh, I'll add a caption to that segment just as needed. But special show for you folks today. This is insider information. I was able through nefarious means to listen in to a recent AtGames board meeting. And I've got the transcript here. And so I want to kind of just cover some things that went on. And so, it's the usual introduction and everybody's talking about getting coffee and stuff. And then it says, first order of business, what do you guys think? Should we send Mike Belinsky as AtGames Mini, or do we want to sit on it for a while? And they're like, oh my gosh, he still doesn't have it. This is a big problem. But then this one guy, looks like some up and coming little snot, was like, well, yeah, we could do that, but let's talk about racing games for a while. And so you got dropped off the agenda, Mike. You were so close to getting your AtGames Mini, but they decided to talk about making a racing game. And so I guess that's what we're going to talk about today. So because we record these sometimes in bunches and different times, we can't really track. We had thought about doing a running counter on how many days Mike's been waiting for his AtGames Legend Mini, but depending on sequencing and stuff, it could get kind of messed up. So we're not doing it, but he's still waiting as of this recording.
It's a lot of days.
Many days, and he's still waiting as we record this. But wanted to, since you got a working Super Console X, I can't kind of pick at that wound anymore. So now it's like, I'll move to, where's your Mini? Just kind of do that for a while. But what they, so good and bad. I think one, the focus of AtGames right now ought to be probably on customer service and getting people the products that they want, but not introducing new products until they can master servicing the ones they have. And getting the ones that they want to sell out. But they did, and I thought it was cool, that they're kind of putting it out to the community, putting out to their fans to say, hey, we've heard you. And there have been a lot of folks talking about, okay, you've done pinball, you've done a multi-arcade. What about a racing one? So I would assume kind of the spirit of this, but they're asking for feedback from everybody to kind of chip in. And so feedback is something Dr. Mike and I can provide. And so we thought we'd do a little bit of that today. So first question, Mike, are you a racing video game guy?
No.
Okay.
It's like how I dramatically leaned in for that.
That's good. Yeah, it drove the point home. Is it because you don't drive in real life?
I think so. Car related stuff just has no appeal to me. And I think it's because, for anyone who doesn't know, I do not drive. So I think that's probably what's at the core of it. Very few car related things, whether they're grounded in reality or not, have any sort of appeal to me. That being said, a huge caveat to that, I absolutely love the Road Rash games.
Yeah.
I think they're some of the best games ever made, particularly the original Genesis games.
Yeah, those are crazy fun. Really, really fun. So one of my favorite games, but it didn't require a whole racing game setup, was the Indianapolis 500 for the Commodore Amiga, which did run basically. So I'm from Indiana originally. So the Indianapolis 500 is kind of like a day of religion for those of us who grew in Indiana. It's basically a real-time Indianapolis 500. You're going to drive the 2.5 mile track. So it's 250 laps. To complete the Amiga Indianapolis 500 game, you have to drive all 250 of those laps and done kind of in appropriate time. So it's a multi-hour investment if you're going to do that, if you're going to actually do the full race. But the amazing thing was, because Amiga always did some cool things with their games, was you could set your car up to be basically indestructible. so that you wouldn't take damage. However, you could inflict damage. And so I won many Indianapolis 500s by getting on the pole, or at least getting in the first or second row, because you had to do to qualify as well. Get in the first or second row, head into that first turn, and then just spin my car out, and would just clear out, the next a big chunk of the folks. And then it took them a while to actually the cars that wrecked stayed on the road or on the track for a pretty long time. So you could clip out a few more people a couple of laps. So it wasn't really accurate to the actual Indianapolis 500 and there that they do actually have the cars. I don't think there was a yellow flag. Well, there was a yellow flag, but you could still whack people and do kinds of different things. So, but it was pretty fun. So I like that, but that wasn't, I didn't need to be sitting in a chair, down in the driver's seat with the gears and all that. I'm not a big driving game either. What I do like are like the jet ski ones or some of the other ones that'll be like a Jurassic Park one, which you are driving a vehicle. But
yeah, the Jurassic Park one, I remember enjoying that. Yeah,
so
which there is a home version of that.
Of the sit down of the
Yes.
Wow, is that a arcade one up deal or?
Ice Games did that. They did because they make the actual arcade one. They have made a home version. Ice Games, though, I feel like doesn't really, nothing against them. Their stuff is great quality. I mean, we've all played it in actual full-size arcades. Their home versions, though, while slightly scaled down, aren't scaled down much in price. So I think the home arcade version of Jurassic Park's like $5,000 or something like that, like crazy huge prices. So I'm not sure whose home they're made for some of these, but I think the cheapest thing in their home arcade range that they have is one of those bubble hockey tables, which is like $3,000. So
interesting. Yeah.
Technically there is a home version of it though.
So we've established neither one of us are like huge racing arcade fans, but if AtGames, I do think it's kind of a cool value proposition if AtGames were to put out like the Legends on multi-arcade or like their pinball, something where you say, hey, you have this huge range of games you can play right out of the gate, all licensing's taken care of, and away you go. Probably a couple hundred games that you'd be able to get just like that. The ability to extend that through ArcadeNet in different ways and different purchasing. So you could bring a lot of things in. So the game selection could be good. A good start, my guess, would be if they stay true to form, a good start to begin with. You get a decent chunk of games. There's some really good titles and then some average titles as well. I'm sure there'll be some Atari 2600 driving game that is like overkill for a cabinet that can do this, but I'm sure they'll have one because they seem to distribute them on other platforms pretty regularly. So that'd be good. But if you were to be designing this, what are some key considerations they should keep in mind outside a good game selection?
So one of the things, even in arcades, that kind of keeps me from racing games, and we talked about a little bit on this with like sightline stuff on the last episode. I'm not a particularly tall person. Like I'm a little over 6 foot, but I'm not a giant or anything like that. Like I'm just slightly over average, and height wise, that puts you out of some of those racing games right away because they're made for like the national average height, which is like 5'9" or 5'10" or something like that. So I'm already like an inch or two too tall for those. And again, not that that's not doable, but it's not super comfortable. So now you're scaling that down for a home market though. That's the first thing I thought of looking at these prototypes. So I have the cockpit style version of the home version of the Star Wars arcade from Arcade 1-Up, which is a great machine, great unit. The yoke is metal, like really sturdily built, really cool design, LED backlights and stuff built into it. Great. Instead of, obviously the complete cockpit that goes over the top of it, it's more of a bench that comes out over it. The bench looks great in my game room, but I have to be honest, like for myself, I mostly take the bench off when I'm playing that and play it like sitting in a stool. it's great for the kids, but you put a grown man behind it, and even different sized grown men that have tried it, it's not a comfortable position to be in, unless you're pushing the bench so far back that there's no point of using the bench. Like it could just be anything you're sitting on at that point. So that's really what makes me, when I look at this again, Star Wars looks really cool. I know there's a stand-up version of it. I would still go with this, knowing that just because it looks better aesthetically in the game room. And the kids love it, love sitting, in the cockpit and stuff like that. Like it, for them, it's awesome. So I still wouldn't do the stand-up version, to be honest with you. But I don't know, not being a huge racing fan, because Arcade One Up does have a racing cabinet as well with basically the same bench setup as the Star Wars cabinet. I don't know that I would go for that personally, because I don't love racing games that much. Am I going to invest in? And this looks. The one thing I will say, the Legends one from these pictures looks like maybe it's a little more sturdy built. I have seen some people saying that they felt, that it wasn't the greatest constructed thing with the bench. And I can see what they're saying, I guess, because the bench is just wood. It's just a wooden bench with like a pad on it. So if you were much bigger or much taller or whatever it is, I could see it even being completely unusable for some people. So maybe this looks a little sturdier, but height wise, I would have real concerns. And if you had to push it and I'm sure it's adjustable, but just like with the bench, like if I have to push it so significantly far back that it's not even connected to the unit anymore, why am I using that?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think so there are some ideas, prototypes, whatever you want to call them, of maybe where AtGames is going to head with this. That does look like it's more than just wood and padding. So
this does look sturdier from what I'm.
Yeah, and I think that would be a necessity, because realistically, you're gonna when you think about actually sitting down in some of these games in an arcade, it's rock solid. I mean, you're in a seat, and it's like a car seat. I mean, you're solid. So you're going to have to do more than particle board and some things. You're going to have to do something sturdy. So then you start getting this thing like to accommodate average to slightly above average height folks. How big does this have to be? You can make it adjustable, but you got to make it adjustable to go cover your bigger folks. And then how heavy is this going to be? Because
that's the other thing, because that was one of the things people were like, oh, well, off the top of my head, I don't know what the weight limit of the Arcade One Up bench is. I want to say it's like 250 pounds or something like that. And there were people like, well, what about bigger people? What's, going to be for that? But then you get into, like you're saying, well, to reinforce it and to make it sturdier, now you're talking about metal, or thicker wood and things like that. Now it's not really as practical to have in your house.
It's if those boxes show up from shipping on your front porch, the AtGames, the Legends Ultimate, when it arrived on my front porch, it was a little bit of work getting it in the house, and I ended up taking it apart and kind of moving it piece by piece to where I wanted it, versus the whole thing. That'd be a feather compared to what this thing would. If you're really going to build something that is sturdy, it's going to have to be metal, and then the seat's going to have to basically be a single unit or a hinge on the seat, to where that's going to be another really heavy piece. And so I just think it'll be interesting to build a high quality one of these that people will want. The materials, the shipping, the engineering, it's going to be coming in at a price point that's going to probably limit how appealing it is, because I don't see this thing coming in. I think I'm just guessing here, but I'm thinking if you built a sturdy quality game, you're talking between 800 to 1,000 for a racing game.
I would think you're got to be pushing $1,000 on this one,
which is, and it's going to have a massive footprint. I mean, it's one of the benefits you've talked about in past shows around the benefits of the 3/4 arcade 1-up environment and those pieces there. I've talked about the benefit of I got it all in one with my Legends
Right.
Ultimate. So there's things you can do to manage the space. But this thing is gonna be, almost take up a pool table footprint. Almost, probably not
Yeah.
quite, but it's gonna be close. And it's like, so how many of those spaces do you have
Well, and
available?
that's the thing with like the Star Wars cockpit, like that bench is adjustable. So when we're not using it, I just push it in up against the machine. Yes, it sticks out further and takes up a larger footprint than the other cabinets do, but not like when it's fully extended out.
Right.
So I mean, you can contract that multiple feet and still keep the whole thing together. So it doesn't take up as much of a footprint as if that was a solid metal block that has a chair attached to it, where there's only so much you can adjust for that. And again, going back to even if it was full arcade size, that's not super comfortable for me height wise. And I'm not unusually tall. Like I'm just slightly taller than the average person is. So when you get into somebody like our friend Dylan, who's like what, 6'4" or something
I think
like
he's
that,
about
6'5",
8 feet, I think.
yeah, 9 feet tall, whatever. So you get into some of these taller people, I don't see how it's going to be a usable product for them. So I do think you're really limiting. You're creating something that is financially limiting, size wise limiting, and now you're cutting out some of your potential market just by height and things like that. So
Yeah.
I do think this is a really specialty kind of product. I think it's cool. I really do, but I don't know that it's for me.
Yeah, and I think we both kind of established that neither this is not like the sweet spot for us in terms of arcade play
Yeah.
anyway. I guess if those are the things that those are the games that you just can't live without, awesome for you. This may be the way to go, but it could be cheap. So, and it's going to take up a
And
lot of
that's the thing. Like,
space.
if I loved, and going back to what we were talking about on another episode that we did, where we talked about some of the pricing going up right now because materials are getting harder to get. The price of a lot of these home arcade units is going up. That would be easier for me to wrap my head around something that's going to be close to $1,000 if I loved racing games and I was going to get something that was really well designed. It was going to be this awesome like piece of furniture in my house, and I was going to sit there for hours and hours playing racing games, but I'm not. So that's, I might play Jurassic Park a few times or try one or two other games. 100 racing games doesn't have much appeal to me though.
No, no, yeah, and it just the variety. I mean, 100, 200, 350 uh, games where you're on a multicade, where you got joystick, trackball, and all that. You've got diversity. You certainly can have diversity in the driving games as well, from the Jurassic Park to Road Rush to lots of different stuff you could do that would be good. But ultimately, the kind of core muscle memory, general action is about the same. So I don't know. I mean, it depends what you like. It is interesting. I think it's good that AtGames is asking people what they want to see. I think it'll be interesting to see where people put their markers down on this is what's most important to me. I got to think sturdiness is going to be high. People are going to want comfort and sturdiness high in this thing, and that's going to make it big, and that's going to make it heavy, and that's going to make it pricey.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Like, I feel like this is home arcade stuff is kind of a specialized market in and of itself. But now I think you're really, really narrow, laser focused on a very, very small group of people. So I don't know how they're going to weigh that against the price.
Yep. It'll be interesting to see. So we just wanted to kind of talk about a little bit, give some feedback. If you folks have some thoughts, opinions, want to straighten Mike and I about that we're not enjoying the fullness of arcade living without getting more into driving games, have at it. Let us know in the comments. We appreciate hearing from you. I did want to go back to the notes from the AtGames board meeting because the next meeting is going to be in October, and they ended the meeting with "Screw Dr. Mike." So I thought that was interesting.
That's kind of how I feel like it's going.
Yeah, I don't know. I think they've got an attitude about you. I don't know why. It might be the fact that you're promoting sacrifice. I'm not sure. It could be many things that come into play. Anything else for this show, Mike? Thanks for watching, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.